All right, YouTube. So over the last weekend, I had my jet ski up in Michigan. I was out jumping some big waves in Lake Michigan, and everything was going great for a day. And then the next day, I was going, I'd have a wide open throttle, and then the jet ski would just fall on its face. And then it'd sputter, and I'd give it some throttle, play with it. It'd start going, and then fall on its face. Go on, start falling on its face, and just had to repeat that. And I didn't hear anything that sounded weird. There was nothing in my jet box underneath where the water gets sucked in. The carburetor seemed all right. I just rebuilt the carbs last year. And so I was trying to figure out what was going on. And I troubleshooted the problem being air inside my fuel lines. Now what I noticed, what was happening when I would rev the jet ski, I noticed that there was air bubbles coming through my fuel line out from the switch. There's a fuel switch here on the side. And I noticed there's air bubbles in that fuel line when I would rev. And so what I found out is that when you would stay around 3,000 or 4,000 RPMs, it wasn't sucking the gas fast enough to suck the air through, so you're fine. But when you went full out, it would start sucking and pumping that gas really fast, and it would actually suck the air bubbles down into the carb, cause the carb to choke out, and it would, sputter and die, and you have to start it back up. And that was another key thing. I noticed it always would start right back up, and it would always, at 5,000 or 6,000 RPMs, it would fall on its face, almost consistently. And so what I did is basically just pulled the hoses off that fuel switch, which I don't know if it's bad or if it's just a bad connection, and I just hard or directly attached it to my reserve fuel tank because I'm never worried about the reserve. But a couple things to point out. Problems can be loose connections around your filters and your hoses. It can be a crack in the fuel line if you've got old fuel lines and you haven't replaced them in 10 years. There might be a little pinhole crack in there somewhere that's sucking air in. You might have bad connection up at your switch where I did, or any number of bad fuel lines. And this is why I personally like clear fuel lines and also have clear on my oil lines, so I can visually see the fuel going through there and through my filter, and I can understand what's happening and going wrong. So don't panic if you're going and every time your jet ski falls on its face. Make sure your fuel lines are all good and solidly connected with no air leaks. And then during my research, I also came across some guys that were saying, check your ventilation one-way valve for your fuel tank. There's a valve back under here that allows ventilation. So essentially it allows air to go into your tank, but nothing to go out. And what that does is as you're sucking gas out of your tank, it replaces that volume with air, so you're not having a negative, like a suction. You don't want that. You want the fuel to flow freely. So if your fuel lines are fine, everything's fine, check that valve, because that could also be the cause of why you're falling on your face at full throttle.